Awesome. All right. So this is Adam Alto Healing with a spiritual video and podcast. Today I have a special guest, Ted, part of my mastermind group. Thank you so much for joining me, Ted.
Yeah, no problem, man.
All right. So I'm gonna just keep this short, like I think 15 minutes because I don't want to go too long, but just like
Cool.
power, 15 minutes, power. So
Yeah, sounds good.
all right. So what is spirituality to you? What does it mean to you?
Oh man, that's a big question. God, I guess for me, spirituality, I haven't really like thought about this and never like defined it for myself,
Mm,
but I guess off the top of my head, for me at least, spirituality is really just about like getting in touch with myself and with my own beliefs, really. And I guess getting in touch with myself, but also getting in touch with I guess that I would maybe define as kind of like greater than myself or kind of
mm.
like I don't know, like all that is the universe, God. So it's kind of like simultaneously like getting to know myself, but also like opening up to like everything that's kind of beyond me and my immediate kind of understanding and world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's something like I kind of identify as too, like understanding yourself better, and like generating like a better version of yourself, but also having like a communication with the universe. You know.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's definitely understand myself better is like one of the focuses of my life, but also like for me personally, I'm fascinated by like the universe and by everything else that's out there that I don't fully understand yet. But yeah, definitely maintaining that connection to sort of to the universe, to my higher self, to whatever it is, but that which is sort of beyond my personality.
Mm. Okay, and how did you get into like this spiritual like new age kind of.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of been a I don't know, I think that maybe when I was in like that time I was in high school, I started to sort of like, I kind of got into meditation. I started to honestly, I had some experiences on drugs too that like I've been
Oh.
just to kind of qualify that I've been sober now for 8 years. I haven't drank or done any drugs or anything like that because I kind of had some issues with addiction, but before
Mm,
all that, I had some experiences with just times that I would like smoke weed or different psychedelics I did that kind of I had what I felt like at the time were like direct experiences with what the time I defined as God. And that kind of like blew me
mm,
away. And I'd always like wake up the next day like, oh my God, that's crazy. And it wasn't like I always needed to be on them to experience that, but I did sort of have these first experiences where I felt like I was able to feel something greater than myself. And that sort of led me down the path of spirituality. I started reading books on meditation. I started getting into lucid dreaming. I used to get these crazy lucid dreams when I was, in high school where I was like aware that I was dreaming and I was running around doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And so that really, all that stuff fascinated me. And I kind of just had been hungry for more knowledge about all these topics ever since then. And I think that as and then maybe when I was like 18, I had my first. I'm 30 years old now, but
mm,
when I was about 18, maybe a senior in high school or getting ready to go to college, that was when like the book and the movie The Secret came out, and it's talking about the law of attraction, and that kind of
mm.
that idea when I was that age like blew me away. And so I guess ever since then it's sort of just been this path that I've been really curious and fascinated about. But I would say it started when I was a teenager.
And if you said the psychedelics, could you go a little bit more in detail, like if what you remember, like what did you feel, what did you see?
Yeah, I guess I've always been really like sensitive to psychedelics. Like I definitely used to when I was younger. I smoked weed a lot, but I was always like for me it was always like this intense experience where like I guess I felt like I was like hyper aware. I guess let me try to think. It's so long ago. I just felt like I had this feeling that there was like a higher energy communicating to me. It's hard for me to like put it into words, but like my thoughts would like kind of line up with sort of I don't know. I'm having a hard time kind of like conceptualizing it, but it is I really the only way I can describe it as this like feeling or this knowingness
Hmm.
that there was like a higher energy that was like aware of my presence and I was aware of its presence. And it would happen, times when I had smoked weed, but also times when I had like take mushrooms or LSD. It was when I was really aware of it. And
Hmm.
hard to really conceptualize, but it was just this feeling and this knowingness that there was a lot more to my immediate reality than I had previously believed.
Oh, okay. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
But did you experience any, resistance from the outside when you started, like, expressing your spiritual beliefs, or,
That's a
you know what I
good
mean?
question. It's funny, and it's funny you asked that. I was actually kind of just thinking about the same idea sort of today, how much I've changed in sort of like how I express my beliefs now. I think that, yeah, when I was like, late teens, early 20s, when I was really getting into this stuff, I was so fascinated by it. And I was trying, I was doing, the things like law of attraction, like, like attracts like, think certain
Mm,
thoughts, get certain things back in your reality. And so I was doing that stuff. And at times it would work and it'd blow me away and I'd be so excited about it. And I would definitely like, tell my friends and tell my family and was like, this stuff is, so awesome, so amazing. And some people for sure would engage me and they would, agree is awesome. I think some people, not that I like experienced like outward resistance, but I think some people were just kind of like overwhelmed by that idea and they weren't really like for where they were at in their life. I don't want to say they weren't ready for it because that implies that I was in some
mm.
like advanced stage, which I don't think by any means I was. It was just
Uh-huh.
what I was exploring in that moment. I think that they just weren't really interested in that. And so like some people sort of had no idea what I was talking about. And I think as I've gotten older, I've been more along the lines of attraction rather than promotion. I don't
Mm,
try to go around to people and tell them what I believe and tell them that they should believe this. Like I really never initiate any of those conversations. I think that the way I try to operate now and has been more successful is like I live my life. I apply these spiritual principles to myself on a daily basis and I know that they work. And if somebody ever, engages me in conversation and asks me and it kind of leads down the, in the direction of them being curious or whatever it is, then I'll engage them in conversation, but I don't really go out of my way to try to tell people about things that I do, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
which I think I did when I was younger. And I think that it's just like when a Jehovah's Witness would knock on my door or somebody who's trying to recruit me to their religion, like I'm never gonna go with them. I'm never gonna, I mean, I might like engage them in conversation, but they're never gonna convince me to believe the same way that they believe. It just, for me, that would never work. Just like if I go up to somebody who has no interest in spirituality and start trying to talk with the law of attraction, they're probably just gonna not really be interested and care. So I kind of wait for the opportunity to be in front of me, and if it feels right to talk about it, for sure, I try and share my beliefs.
So what about, like, meeting other, like, spiritual people? Do you go out of your way to do that, or do you not care? Or?
Um, I would say not regularly. I think that, I met you and some of these other guys in this group, and, I think I saw you posted something on Reddit, and I was like, oh, this would be cool to join this. But I don't regularly go out of my way to meet spiritual people. I have pretty strong, so as I mentioned earlier, I got sober about 8 years ago, and part of my path to recovery, you know sobriety for a lot of people is like a very
Mm,
spiritual path. And so when I initially got sober, I started joining 12 step groups, which are basically, I don't know if you've heard of 12 step groups. So it's basically like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, any of those
yeah,
like
yeah.
anonymous groups. And so really, and I didn't know this about them until I started going to them because I needed to stop drinking and doing drugs, is that they're actually very spiritual programs. It's all based around understanding yourself and spirituality and kind of what they refer to as a God of your understanding. And so that sort of led me, I was really active in these groups for a couple of years. And through that, I met all my closest friends now and even my wife. And so they are all just naturally, because they're people who are on a similar path, they're naturally very
Mm,
spiritual people. And so I've stayed in touch with a lot of these people and, kind of, I'm somewhat active in that community still. And so I think that has given me like a base of people who, although their spirituality may be a little different than mine, I think they're naturally kind of like seekers, people who want to learn more about themselves or more about spirituality. So I think I've been lucky to, I guess at that point, yeah, I sought them out, but I think I've been lucky to have enough people in my life that I don't find myself actively searching for more. But I think that I definitely, at times, based on what's going on in my life, I will randomly bump into people who do share similar beliefs, and it leads to like awesome conversations and people I stay in touch with. But it's not something that I'm actively like searching to find more of, if that answers your question.
Yeah, okay, I see. And you mentioned like this 12 steps and getting sober. Would you say that's one of the biggest shifts you had in your life, or is it something
Yeah,
kind of,
absolutely.
yeah?
I mean, it was a massive shift in my life. It was something that, like, if I needed to do one for my own like health and sanity, and two, it was kind of the time in my life where I was forced to like really take accountability for everything in my life. I
Mm,
flew across the country, went to like a treatment program, went to I stayed in a sober house after I had to, I worked a, $9 an hour job washing dishes to pay my rent. And I was just really I was kind of like, I went from growing up and having I grew up from a wealthy family and I had money and all sorts of circumstances led to like me all of a sudden being on my own with nothing. And it was actually like the best thing that could have happened for me. So yeah, definitely that was a major shift. And I think that I started to, become more accountable to myself. I started to kind of like, it like really humbled me, I think. It just kind of like, knocked me down a few pegs, if that makes sense. And it
mm.
really humbled me. And I lived a simple life and I met, a lot of people on a similar path. And then for the next many years after that, I slowly kept, increasing my, spiritual. I slowly kept learning more about spirituality and, what that meant to me. And then I think another big shift was probably, I always knew about like Abraham Hicks and the law of
Mm.
attraction, and that was always pretty awesome. And then as I started, getting more into that, that's when I stumbled upon like Bashar, which we've talked about, and I think the Reddit post that I saw that you made that
It
you
was,
led to
yeah,
this
on
group was
our
on
SSani, yeah.
right. So one of his kind of things. And so, yeah, a few years ago, I stumbled upon Bashar, and then I really started that stuff just fascinated me. And there was things behind, things about it that I still was like, and even I still sometimes now I'm like, whoa, this is like almost too out there. But just the basic
Mhm.
premise of his teachings have really fascinated me. And for the past few, probably maybe like 3 or 4 years, but more intensely the past 2 years, I've really been trying to like apply some of that stuff. And so yeah. I mean, a bunch of like minor shifts here along the way in the past 8 years, but definitely getting sober was like probably the biggest shift in the trajectory of my life, I would say.
Wow. Your story is really similar to a friend of mine I mentioned in one of my videos, Isabella, and she had like a drug problem, and
Mm,
the difference was she moved. Her dad sent her to Poland for like
okay.
the sober house, but after that, she surrendered to the universe, and she got better. And now she's like a life coach,
Oh, it's
because
awesome, man.
of the tragedy. But
Yeah.
um, so what I like to mention a lot, and what's really helped me on my spiritual path, is like the idea of dharma and the
Mm.
purpose of your life. What would you say is your dharma, and how do you try to live it?
Oh man. Oh, I love these questions. That's why I'm so happy that um that we're doing this right now because and even when you asked me earlier, I was excited just because I knew you're going to ask me questions of things that I don't really take time to think about that I probably could benefit from doing so more. So one more time, the question is, what was my dharma, and was there another
Yeah,
part of the
and
question?
how do you try to live it?
Okay, all right, let's see here. So I think that at least right now, I feel like my dharma is, I guess, a combination of me. Let me think how I'm going to try and phrase this. I would say it's really just trying to like inspire and spread love to the people around me.
Mm,
I it's funny. I have one of my best friends died this summer, and he was also in recovery. He had been sober for a long time. We got sober together, and he relapsed on heroin, and he
mm,
died. Which is been super tragic for me. But there was quote that he was a big writer, and he was just like the coolest guy ever, like such an amazing dude. And there was a quote that so one of my friends recently pulled up that he had written, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm gonna try and like paraphrase it, but it was basically he was saying that, throughout his whole life he always wanted to leave a mark on the world, like whether that was start a company, write a book, whether it was like leave something tangible that the world could kind of remember him by. And he said that, as he's gotten older, he believes that the most important thing he could possibly do, rather than write a book, rather than start a company, is just be kind and loving to the people he meets on a daily basis and spread that love, because that in the long term, the spreading of love and kindness just to like the people in your life, whether it's like, people that you see at work, whether whoever it is, just being that kind of light in the world on a daily basis is going to always like, you know have a longer, bigger lasting effect than like some book you wrote. Nothing wrong with writing a book, but just kind of like living that on a daily basis. So I feel like right now in my life, and that's something I really identify with. My dharma, my purpose is to just be that light for as many people I see, whether it's my wife, my daughter who's just born a few months ago, whether it's, I'm a teacher at a boarding school with my students, whoever it is, just like be a good person, somebody that can serve as a role model for, and like, and I don't want this to sound like I have some, like there's still a lot of things that I need to learn about myself,
Mm.
but, for like the kids that I teach, just somebody that they can look to who they know is going to be unconditionally loving and kind. And I feel like that in itself can kind of spread to a bigger level. So I don't right now, like I don't have some big major specific goal that I'm working towards. Really just, living a passionate life myself and spreading that to as many people as I can.
Yeah, in spoken like a true light worker,
Mm.
I
Yeah.
would say. Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
really agree. That's my purpose. I would say, the spreading of joy, which is basically, light to, being, the unconditionally loving, and especially like, I think, but that light has to come from within first, you
Yes.
know.
Definitely. Yeah, but no, exactly like you just said, light worker, and I know, I believe it's a Course in Miracles, and they say that like there's a prayer or something along the lines of like, who am I supposed to see? What am I supposed to say? What I forget what
Mhm.
it is, but basically like the idea that the people, as you go through life, like today, later in life, or later in my day, I'm gonna have a friend coming over. I'm gonna see a couple different people. Like those are the people I'm supposed to see today, and so that's my job, is to spread love and spread light to those people who I interact with.
All right. We actually went a little bit over 15 minutes, but do you want
Oh
to keep
wow.
going? I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you have any more questions or want to chat about anything, I'm not in a rush. So,
All right, great. Yeah, I do have some more. So, you mentioned this in the group a while ago, but I think for our listeners it'd be great. Like, how do you deal with negativity?
do you mean negativity like from other people, or if I'm being negative, or I guess is there like a context you mean?
Well, I'll go to other people, but I think that's a different topic.
Mm.
Just like, let's say, you find yourself in a low vibe for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Life happens. What do you do when you're experiencing those, low frequencies?
right. If I am feeling those low frequencies, what do I do? Um, I would say it kind of depends. I think that a lot of times it's funny because sometimes those low times are like blessings. Because if
Hmm.
I look back, as I said that, I got really into Bashar and those teachings, and those have been really, huge for me. And what led me to those was, there's times that I was super stressed out about my job, about my life, about, things that were happening. There's a period a few years ago where I was getting crazy bad insomnia, and I wasn't sleeping for like nights and nights and nights on end. And it was just like, I felt like I was going crazy. And so a lot of times when I go to those negative places, my reaction, and I guess I feel like I'm happy that this is sort of how I've trained myself to respond to that, is I search for things that can inspire me. And so
Mm,
things like, I'll read a book, or, the things like A Course in Miracles, or I'll look at a Bashar video, or I'll do something that inspires me. And so that always, that's more of like if I'm alone and I have plenty of time and I can sit there and, digest something. I try to seek to something that'll kind of like raise my, vibration a bit,
mm,
which, has led me to some wonderful teachings. I think that, but yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I do. I try to, and it used to be my old response was like I would do drugs or I would do something to totally distract and ignore it. And
mm.
I think sometimes I think there's sometimes there's nothing wrong in like distracting yourself, playing a video game, getting your mind off something. But for me, I try to reach out and find something that is gonna kind of boost me back up.
Yeah, I think uh when I do that sometimes, like well, I'll turn on Bashar or like listen to Course in Miracles, and that helps sometimes. But then sometimes I don't know, maybe it doesn't help.
Mm.
Like I'm still
Yeah,
stuck in it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And definitely, I think that ultimately, I think that ideally there's going to be an element of like action. I think that there's like only so much you can do that is actually, a mental thing. Only so much you can read, so much you can listen to. But I feel like our lives are like at the end of the day centered on the actions we take. And so I think that, there's for example, I think about in my relationship with my wife, like if there's something that I'm feeling kind of negative about or something that like maybe we disagreed on, I always find that there's something like I always feel much better when I'm able to recognize that there's some type of communication that we're not having between each other, when I'm able to actually like speak it and take the action to bring the conversation up, or take the action to, show love and affection towards her, or take some type of action. And I feel like if I'm
Mm.
able to take some positive action, and I think in every circumstance it's different, but I think that tends to kind of help, if you know what I'm saying. Like I think when I'm just kind of sitting there thinking and trying to like, change my state of being through my mind, I think it can only take you so far. And that, there's something about like getting up and taking some sort of action that oftentimes is an important piece for me.
Yeah, that's so funny. I actually just made a podcast today about how to get out of low vibes, and
Mm.
that's what I mentioned is to, like move your body or do something, anything.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
because I would just sit with it and it'll just fester and grow. You know, even no, it's like fighting like fire with fire. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
so
most definitely, man. I think, yeah, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much, like, for me personally, like, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I think about like, meditation. And for me, like I can only like do, meditations here. I'm not somebody who like regularly meditates. I try to
mhm,
do some guided meditations and stuff sometimes, but like for me, I prefer, I don't know if you've ever done yoga, but I prefer
every
doing
day.
like a little more like, what'd you say?
Yoga, like yeah, I do
Yeah.
it every day in the morning.
Oh, you do? Okay, there you go. So like something, and then I don't know if you're doing Kundalini yoga.
Yep, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So for me, something like that even is so much more powerful than like just sitting in like a contemplative, meditative state. Everyone's so different, but like I can only sit there and like, calm my mind and be in this meditative state for so long. It can only accomplish so much for me. And there's something about the like, Kundalini taking that action and those breaths and kind of getting my vibe up that's a little bit more effective for me. So yeah, sort of that little more like get your body moving, get your, breathing going, get your kind of like energy levels up is definitely helps me, I think, more than just kind of like the mental process.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But there's this spiritual sayings. You hear like life is a school. Do you agree with
Mm.
that, or what?
Um,
What is your interpretation of that?
I guess it's funny. The first thing that comes to mind when you say that is I remember I think we've talked about them. Have you read the Conversation with God books?
Hmm.
So those are some of my like all-time favorite books, and I think it's in the very first book. He Neil Donald Walsh like says how he, people say life's a school, and the instant response he gets is like, no, it's not. And that like you're not here to learn anything specific. It's more like you're here to explore whatever it is that you've chosen to explore, and that there's no like things that you have to learn and things that you're going to fail at and things that you're kind of being graded on. It's sort of like what you make it. And so I don't know. I think that depending on how you interpret that statement, I think that I could agree with it. I think that, you know, I don't know, actually. I kind of go back and forth. I'm curious, what do you think?
Well, in that book, actually, if you remember, he said like you're here to remember,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
his learning implies like lack of knowledge, but like here is like
Right.
to remember who you really are. Um,
Yes.
but with the other side, I do believe we have lessons,
Yes.
like spiritual lessons, like with. But I think Bashar talks about you have that blueprint. You
Hmm.
come in with a specific lesson in mind. I do. I think. Well, being human, I think most of us is like transcending darkness to light.
Mm.
So, but what
Yeah.
would you say is your biggest lesson you've learned so far on your path?
Right. And I do totally agree. I think that and I'll answer the question about my biggest lesson in a second. I definitely think that there are themes that we are kind of given in this lifetime to explore, but I
Hmm.
feel like from an even bigger, larger picture, that like if we don't get the lesson, that it's not a big deal. I think that it could seem that way in our immediate reality, but I think from like an infinite perspective, like you that I don't know how to phrase this really, but that like there's not some chance that you're gonna fail and you miss the boat, that you're always gonna be able to kind of
Mm,
pick back up where you left off. Anyway, my biggest lesson, I would say the biggest lesson that I'm currently working on and have, I think, been learning is, I think it comes to mind is probably to just trust myself.
mm,
Just the
yeah.
idea of, I think that, like you said, he says like Neil Donald Walsh says in the book that we're here to remember that, like, I know what I need to know, that I have all the answers that I need, and that I don't, need this outside reassurance and validation, that if I'm able to get in touch with my true self, that, whatever it is that I need to be doing, I can do, and I can do it very successfully. So I think that getting really in touch with myself and trusting myself has been huge.
Yeah, same with me. Biggest I would say, yeah, like I would get like intuitive downloads, not to do something when I was
Mm,
like younger, or like, to do something and I wouldn't listen to it. I don't
mm,
know why, but like um now I always listen to my intuition, uh
yeah, that's
really
huge.
helps. Yeah. But speaking of which, so how do you talk to the universe? How to, like, for me personally, I like to journal, or I go on like walks by myself, have a conversation with with the guides, or with my
Mm.
higher self. What, do you do anything like that, or?
I would say that not, it's funny as you're saying this, not in a, not in like a super direct, like planned out long period of time where I'm doing it. I generally will throughout my day multiple times. Some days more than others. Some days I never do. We all have those days where we're not
Mm,
as connected as normal.
yeah.
I would say, I take a deep breath, I kind of close my eyes, and I just quickly ask my higher self for guidance. And I feel what it feels like when I know I'm receiving that guidance. And I kind of feel my knowingness that what comes up is what I'm supposed to be focused on. And it kind of helps me ground myself in the present moment. And then following that, as I kind of continue on with my day, the things that the people I see, the conversations I have, the things that are seemingly negative that all of a sudden pop up, I kind of have this knowingness like, wait a minute, this isn't negative. This is a something that I can kind of transform. And so I think
Mm.
it's more about like, periodically throughout my day, connecting with my higher self and asking for guidance. And then the kind of conversation with the universe is more about my like my day as I'm going out in the life, as I'm going out in the world and the things that happen, kind of like using those. That's my conversation is responding to the person who's upset, responding to the negative event, responding to whatever's going on. It's sort of like that's it, kind of in that moment, if that makes sense.
Okay, I see. So, uh, throughout the day, when you feel like you need that guidance, you ask for it.
Yeah, I would say so. Throughout the day when I need it. Sometimes if I'm having a great day, I just will do it even if I don't feel I need it, just kind of like reestablish that connection. But yeah, just kind of trusting that it's more of like an act rather than like a conscious dialogue. It's more of like an active as I go through life, trying, doing my best to have the knowingness that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
All right, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And I journal from time to time, not as much as I used to. And
mhm.
before I go to bed, I will try, at times I'll take time to like, try to connect to the universe, connect to my higher self. But it's never been I've always, I have never been somebody who like has a set, like wake up in the morning, set this time, in the afternoon, this time, at night, this time. I don't know. That's just never really worked for me. I'm much more of a kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of I go with things, and if something feels off, then I know I need to like recalibrate myself. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, totally. Um, so we're almost, I think we're a little bit over half an hour.
Okay.
But if you could just, quickly give some advice to someone, let's say, who's like new into spirituality, they're just starting and maybe they read The Secret,
Yeah, yeah.
what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I would say to know that things are unfolding in the way that they're supposed to. I look back on my spiritual journey, and there's times when I've, had these crazy highs, these crazy lows, and times where I've been, questioning things and wishing things were moving faster or wishing things were different. And as I look back, I feel like my life has sort of been this perfect orchestration, that all the negatives I had, I needed to have, all the positives
Mm,
I had, I needed to have. And so I would really say just trust yourself, trust your process, trust that you are where you need to be, even if at times it doesn't feel that way. And be loving and kind to yourself. And honestly, the most important thing I think at the end of the day, which I really believe, is to just enjoy the process, like to, lighten up and try not to be super serious about it. I think that spirituality for a lot of people, and I think that this is kind of changing, but I think a lot of, some people approach spirituality in a very like intense and rigid way, and they kind of have these like, you know, um, kind of like it can be very rigid. And I think
mm.
for me, that's so the opposite. When I look at, I did a program at a yoga retreat center in last March. It was a Kundalini yoga program with a man named Guru Singh, and he was this guy was in his 70s, and he was this Kundalini master, and with this long beard down to his knees. And I think was wearing this like white robes and white hat, and you look at him and you think like, oh my God, this man, he's this super
Mm.
spiritual, almost serious guy. But like you meet him and he's just the most silly. He's like a child. He's so silly and fun, and the most opposite of serious that I could ever imagine. He was just the most easygoing, funny, like laid back guy. And that to me is really what it's about. Like, I don't think there needs to be, for me, it might be different for other people, but things can be fun. They don't need to be serious. It doesn't need to be like, oh my God, I missed my 10-minute meditation, I'm screwed. Like, just enjoy your life and trust that it's going the way that it needs to go. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
All right, so trust the process and enjoy the journey.
Exactly. Well said.
All right, great. Well, I think that's good enough for today. Thank you so much, Ted, for
Yeah,
sharing your insights.
absolutely. Thank you, Adam. I enjoyed doing this.
Well, okay, I think that's it. So I'm gonna end it right here, and
All right.